Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to be analyzing a chess game between a 2500 and a 1900. So in this game, they play the Grob. So for those of you that know the Grob, it's a very terrible opening. It starts with G4 for white. It's, white's opening. And it's just horrible. Looking at it just makes me want to cry. First of all, it weakens the white king. Second of all, it has absolutely no tactical or strategical vision. So, whatever. For those of you that don't know the Grob yet, well, today you'll find out in a Grandmaster game. So yeah, let's go. Okay, so we got 2,510 as white versus 1,913 for black. So first move, G4. So for those of you who do not know the Grob, this just looks terrible, doesn't it? I mean, G3, pawn G3 is slightly better, because then you get to fianchetto your bishop without overextending your G pawn. But this time, moving it to G4, that's just blinding. There's really nothing you could do with G4. I mean, yeah, you get some king side space, but then you kind of don't go for the central space, and you also weaken your king side space. But this guy, this 2500 playing as white, is probably just trolling the 1900 playing as black, because he sees, okay, my rating is just superior to this 1900, so let me play the worst opening in history, the Grob. So black, he plays d5, and then fianchetto bishop. It would have been better if that pawn was on g3, not g4. Bishop takes. White, he's just like, I don't care. I lose a pawn, I'm still gonna win this. Alright, so white plays c4. And notice that if black takes, d takes c4, then the bishop takes on b7. And then that rook on a8 will just be captured after. So bishop goes back, he's kind of smart. Queen goes here, adding more pressure on d5 while at the same time attacking b7. So it's a double-sided blade. Now, black chose to defend the d5 pawn. White takes the b7 pawn. There's really no other option. Knight moves away, so that way the rook on a8 will be protected by the queen. And now c takes d5. It's just a trade of pawns, but this actually kind of helps white win, because now white, he has a queen side majority. He has 2 pawns on a queen side versus black's 1 pawn on a queen side, and he could get a passed pawn. So knight c3, further attacking d5. Rook just moves aside. See, I don't get the point of this. What was this? What was this? I mean, the rook moving, it was kind of useless. Yeah, you're chasing the queen away, so what? The queen has everywhere else to go, including taking that a7 pawn. You just hung your pawn, man. What's wrong with you? So I don't know what this 1900 is thinking of right now. So now white, his queen side pawns on the a file and b file are just completely unopposed. That's going to cause a huge issue for black. Black, he just plays knight on g to f6. And then knight f3. And then black tries to get his bishop fianchettoed, so that way his bishop could get developed, and that way he could castle. Only problem, he doesn't have any queenside pawns. He has absolutely no control over the queen side, and he barely has control over the center. Um, and white, I have a feeling he's just keeping all of his pawns at their home square just to be trolling black. Look at them. There's only one pawn that moved in this entire. Okay, fine. Two pawns that moved in this entire game. The C pawn and the G pawn. But everyone else, they just sit back, relax, enjoy the show, eating popcorn on the sidelines, maybe drinking some Fanta soda. Knight moves. Bishop gets free and shadowed. Knight moves again. You see, there's a fork. Now, however, this fork isn't that, it's not very threatening as it might look like. Yeah, it's attacking the rook. It's attacking the queen at the same time. It's even attacking the e7 pawn. All right. That doesn't really matter. But the thing is, black, he could just move his queen away, and at the same time protect his rook, and attack the white queen. And so here's the thing: if white moves his queen away, then his knight on c6 will be captured. So white has to take the black queen in order for him not to lose any material. Rook takes back, of course, and knight travels back. Castles. Now black, he has both of his rooks in the game. All of his pieces as in non-pawns, as in minor pieces and the major pieces, rooks, they're all in the game. They're all, they all have an actual presence in the game. They could actually do something, I don't know. But white, here's the thing, he only has two knights and fianchettoed bishop on g2 that's actually developed. Nothing else is developed. And so I'm kind of surprised. Black should be taking the initiative and should be actually trying to attack. Yeah, castling it's really good, but black already was ahead in development, so you should have just went ahead and try to attack the white king, because that white king has only 3 pieces protecting it versus black's would be 5 pieces. So yeah. Now white castles, so now he's actually safe. Rook to a8, and then now you could tell white starts his queenside pawn push down to the other side of the board. Knight goes down, takes. So yeah, so this move kind of discovers an attack on d4, and it also attacks c3. Bishop takes back. Bishop takes again. You see, I don't like the fact that black actually took on c3, because so if you look at the position here, so both black and white, they have pawns on the d file all the way to the h file. Now, with the bishop taking on c3, this drags the d pawn over to the c file, and so now white has an even larger queenside majority. It's just I don't know why black did this. Rook takes. That was good though. That was really good. Because you might have noticed that if A takes on B3, rook takes down. The rook on A8 takes on A1. Kind of bad, And so this, at first glance, might seem kind of suicidal for the pawn, but actually it's not, because if D takes C4, then that opens up the bishop on G2. It opens it to A8, and it could take the rook. So of course black sees this, doesn't take, actually protects the pawn even more, and the rook jumps over to attack the d5 pawn even more. Rook to b4 takes. I guess, yeah. But wait, I'm not sure why. Yeah, black, he could have. No, he couldn't. Yeah. So black had insufficient defenders down, and then now this is kind of really annoying, right? So as black, you see the pawn, and you're like, oh no, a pawn is advancing on me. It's gonna get a promotion. Wait, I could take e takes d6, right? No, you're wrong, because you still got that annoying bishop on g2 that's looking at your a8 rook. It's saying hi from the other side of the board. It's waving, screaming, and probably throwing rotten tomatoes at it. So black sees this, moves the rook over. Bishop moves over to attack the rook and further protect the d6 pawn, but instead the rook on b4 just attacks the bishop back. Bishop goes here, rook attacks it again, bishop goes back, because I guess he doesn't want to do a 3-move repetition. Takes, bam. That wasn't really anything. And then bishop takes, and then you still have another passed pawn running down the other side of the board. Yeah, you have a lot of trading in the center, and there's that one pawn on the A file that's just sneaking along like James Bond, hoping not to be spotted by anyone. So now the rook jumps over to b8. Pawn just continues sneaking. Now rook on c to b4. Now notice that yes, there is an open space on g2, but now that's being guarded by the black bishop on e4, so white's king cannot go up to g2. That's going to be a problem, because then if black rook goes down to b1, white rook is forced to take, other black rook on b8 takes on b1, and you're just kind of forced with bishop c1 and rook d1, which will not prevent any checkmate. So that's kind of sad. So white sees this, attacks the bishop, and also gives him some gives his king some space on f2 and g2. Bishop goes all the way back. He's like, bye, and takes the Lambo all the way to the Sahara Desert. And then pawn goes down. Rook tries to attack bishop. King just protects. Why run away when you could just protect it? Rook continues to go down. One more square. You see, this is kind of useless. Why not move it down to b2 in the first place? Why move it to b3? So redundant. Pawn goes down. That's kind of annoying. Rook moves over. Bishop over. And black just tries to get some king space or try to make his pawns look like it's a threat. And now this kind of is to make the pawn on a7 promote. So notice that if white rook goes down to b8, the black rook is kind of forced to take. And if he takes, then pawn a7 goes to b8 promotes. That's gonna be bad. So rook goes over. Rook still goes down. Check. So I'm not sure why white didn't do anything about this. It was a free pawn for black. White just gotta move away. f6. Rook on a3 protects the rook on b8. And that was really useless. Check again. And there's a free pawn for actually that's not free, never mind. And then you have king going to f7. Takes, rook goes down again, but notice that now it's not as forced. The rook on e8 doesn't have to take on b8 because it's not really pinned. to the king anymore. So rook just moves over. Pawn moves up, and that's discovered check and takes. And then that happens. That pawn moves up. I'm not sure why. I think it was to prevent black from moving his pawn down to h3. And maybe prevent black from having an extra move. Like if he doesn't want to move his position and he just want to stays in his nice perfect position, he could just he could have just moved his pawn to h3, but now now white takes the opportunity away. Bishop moves over, king moves, bishop is in danger now. Bishop goes back, king goes back, king takes, that's kind of sucky. King goes here, bishop goes all the way back to the Sahara Desert, and then h4. So now not only do you have a pass pawn on a7, you have a pass pawn on h4. That's double bad for black, and he's also down a pawn. Yeah, he has one pass pawn, but that's not going to do him much compensation. Bishop goes all the way back to America, and then h5, check. That didn't really do much. King moves over, and in the meantime, check again. And so notice that white, he is not very much trying to do anything with the pawn on a7. Here's the strategy. So white, he wants both of his pawns on a file and h file. He wants both of those pawns to be as close to the other side of the board as possible. So that way black's forces has to be split, and black doesn't have a lot of forces. And so that's gonna cause black some headache. And since the pawns are all the way on opposite sides of the board, that's black. And notice that the king is advancing to the a file, and it's just there now. So that kind of sucks for black, because that's the strategy. You have a pawn on h6 that black has to deal with, and by doing so, he can't really do anything about a7. And rook takes, king moves over, king moves over, king moves over, and notice that queen, yes, queen is taken, yeah, sure, but in essence, this is more of as white, you're trading a pawn for a bishop, because it's a pawn, right? You're not really trading a queen for a bishop. That queen did nothing. It might as well be a pawn. And so, takes. And then king moves over, king goes there. It's just going back and forth. And free pawn. And then king to g8, king moves over to g6, and that's kind of game right now. Check. Pawn moves up, and black cannot really prevent the pawn from promoting, and so he's dead and he's surrendered. So that would be about it for today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Learned a lot about the Grob and how useless it is. And if you guys did, leave a like, subscribe, and click that notifications bell to see more chess videos.